Welcome to meeting number 49 of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. Members are attending in person in the room as well as remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments for the benefit of the members. Please do wait until I recognize you by name before you speak. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please do mute yourselves when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom is at the bottom of their screen, and they do have a choice of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder again that all comments, both for the witnesses and for the members, should go through the chair. In accordance with our routine motion, also known as the Bergeron motion, I can inform all members that witnesses have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. Allow me also at this juncture to welcome two new members who have joined us for today's purposes, Ms. Shelby Cramp-Newman, as well as Ms. Natalie Sinclair Dugagnier. So it is now my great pleasure to welcome from the Embassy of the Republic of Peru, His Excellency, Mr. Roberto Rodriguez, who serves as the ambassador here in Ottawa. As well, he is accompanied by Mr. Carlos Alfredo Garcia Palacios, the Deputy Chief of Mission, and Mr. Juan Pablo Guerrero Espinoza, the Political Affairs Officer at the Peruvian Embassy here in Ottawa. And before we do start, Your Excellency, just want to thank you for accommodating us. You were willing to appear before us last week, but it was agreed to defer it to today. Now, yes, Mr. Bergeron.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very briefly, I'd like to table a motion that the committee report to the committee the report on Azerbaijan pursuant to the standing orders and a statement made in November, and further to a request made by the Government of Canada to open the Lachin corridor to guarantee the freedom of movement given the deterioration that's occurred in the country. We will have an opportunity to discuss with this later on, Mr. Chair, but I would like to point out that I will be sharing my time with my colleague from Terrebonne.
Very much, Mr. Bergeron. Now we will proceed with the opening remarks of the Ambassador. Mr. Ambassador, you will be provided 5 minutes, and once you get very close to the 5-minute mark, I will be holding up this sign as an indication that we'd be grateful if you could kindly wrap it up. The same rule applies when the members are asking you questions, because each member is allotted a specific time. If it's getting very close to that mark, again, I will put this up, and we'd be grateful if you could try to summarize what you are saying. So on that point, Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am very pleased to accept your invitation to appear at the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development today to discuss before this distinguished gathering on the current situation in Peru. As you know, last December the 7th, former President Castillo attempted to disrupt democracy and stage a coup d'etat. If President Castillo had achieved this goal, today we will be facing a dictatorship rule in Peru. Due to these actions, the Peruvian Congress declared his vacancy, and former Vice President Dina Boluarte assumed the presidency of Peru following a constitutional succession process in compliance with the rules of the Peruvian Constitution. I would like to emphasize that the decision of former President Castillo was harshly criticized by his own cabinet of ministers, the legislative, judicial branches, the public ministry, the Ombudsman Office, political parties, foreign governments, public opinion in general, and including the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. President Boluarte has proposed to Congress a path to move forward and resolve the current situation by bringing in advance to the time to have general elections so that a new president can assume office by the end of 2023 or early 2024. It is important to point out that the transition government from its first day set as a priority the implementation of policies to address the most urgent social demands of the population. It is relevant to highlight the installation of dialogue tables in several regions of the country in order to address the most pressing demands of the population. This is a mission that was assigned to the Cabinet of Ministers aimed at building a direct communication channel between citizens and local, regional, and central government authorities. Despite the willingness for dialogue offered by this new government, a series of demonstrations and justified protests arose in order to meet the social demands of the population. It is very important to distinguish between the protests being made peacefully by a large part of protesters exercising their right of freedom of expression and demonstration versus a group of people who have dedicated themselves to generate violence in the streets in the last weeks, especially in the south of the country, seeking to impose their own agenda through these violent acts. The Peruvian government does not seek to label any person who participates in the protests. The Peruvian Minister of Foreign Affairs has emphasized the government identifies at least three types of protesters: those who have a legitimate demand as part of the great social gaps that afflict us as a society, then the supporters of former President Pedro Castillo, who through measures of pressure seek to promote various political agenda, ranging from the release of the former president to the holding of a constituent assembly, and finally, violent groups that have committed proven attacks and acts of vandalism and should be punished according to the law and the constitutional order. I would like to reiterate that Peru recognizes the right to peaceful protests and remains firm and determined to bring order and provide security to all Peruvians when these violent groups use force, destroying critical infrastructure and endangering the safety and living conditions of the population. The Peruvian government has been emphatic in pointing out that it has not authorized violent repression against demonstrators in the protests. The government of Peru deeply regrets the loss of the irreplaceable lives of 59 of our citizens in the context of these demonstrations and the acts of violence occur in our country. The competent entities, with full freedom and constitutional autonomy, are conducting the investigation to clarify the truth and establish the applicable criminal responsibilities. Likewise, the government is accompanying the families of the victims and ensuring compensation for the tragic loss of their relatives. Furthermore, I can clearly express that the government is providing any support and documented material needed so that justice will take its course and establish responsibilities following due process of law in all cases. President Boluarte and the government are committed to the investigations that are being carried out by the competent authorities and their subsequent results, which will be respected accordingly. In addition, I would like to underscore that acting with total transparency, the current government extended an invitation to the Inter-American Commissions on Human Rights and the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights to visit Peru and become acquainted with the human rights situation in the country. In response to this invitation, the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights conducted a visit between the 11th and the 13th of January, preceded by a preparatory technical mission that took place last December. For this part, the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights of the UN visited the country on January 19 and 20. For the accomplishment of these visits, the Peruvian state provided all the facilities to meet with authorities, representatives of the civil society, and victims of the tragic events, as well as its full cooperation for them in order to carry out their activities. Mr. Chair, each of the more than 33 million Peruvians have human rights. We have the right to protest peacefully, the right to freedom of expression and opinion, as well as freedom of movement, the right to work, access to health and education, and to guarantee these rights, we first need to restore social peace through an open and comprehensive dialogue between all parties involved and leaving behind violence, which is not the appropriate means to achieve political objectives. It is the duty of the Peruvian states and its population to defend the democratic institutionality and reinforce it, guaranteeing respect for the human rights of all Peruvians and ensuring a democratic constitutional transition to the next elected authorities. The government of Peru believes that the solution to the current political situation is the advanced call for new general elections, and we do hope that the international community does support in this constitutional and democratic process. Finally, I wish to thank and recognize the valuable support of the Government of Canada and members of Parliament during President Boluarte's difficult transition period. It is extremely important that we protect democracy and the rule of law, united with friendly governments who share our common values and principles. The Peruvian people wants peace and prosperity and to build a better future for the country and its fellow citizens. I would greatly appreciate your continued support during this period of transition. Canada and Peru have forged a long-standing, solid, and friendly relationship, being strong partners and looking forward to continue working closely to strengthen democracy and the rule of law, not just in our countries, but throughout the region. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Rodriguez. We will now turn to the members for questions. Mr. Hoback, you have the first slot for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Ambassador, and your colleagues for being here this morning to give us the latest update on what's going on in Peru. And I do appreciate the briefings you've given us over time, so this is a nice chance to get it all on the record officially. You talk about the constitutional process that was used to reestablish the interim leadership. Can you maybe describe how that functioned and how that operated?
Yes. The succession of we have the Articles 19 and 112 of the political constitution that establish a term of 5 years for the Congress and the presidency. This means that under ordinary circumstances, the members of Congress, as well as President Boluarte, would finish their current term in July 2026. As I mentioned before, there was a constitutional succession where the former President Castillo tried to attempt to do a coup d'etat. Was an immediate reaction of all the democratic institutions. The Congress convened, and President Castillo was impeached with 103 votes, including all the political parties, including Perú Libre, who was the party that actually presented the candidacy of President Castillo. So after that, following strictly what the Constitution says, Vice President Boluarte was sworn in as the President of Peru. This is the constitutional procedure. But now the government is trying to hear what is the general demand of the population to have in advance a new general electoral process. So to do so, we need to have a constitutional reform. So that's why, taking into account this political crisis and the demands of the population, President Boluarte, in accordance with the provisions of Article 107 of the Political Constitution of Peru, submitted for urgent consideration of the Congress of the Republic a constitutional reform project that modifies the terms of her mandate, by which it proposed that the general elections be moved forward to April 2024. That bill was approved last December in a first vote with 93 votes. I must point out that prior to the presentation of this bill, there was another one presented within the Congress in which it was proposed to hold elections in December 2023, assuming the new government on May the 1st, 2024. That project was rejected. Subsequently, in January, they left aside the bill that was presented by the executive branch, and the Congress, within the Congress, was presented two projects. Again, sought to bring forward elections to December 2023, which did not achieve the necessary consensus to be approved. For this reason, President Boluarte presented for the second time a new project to advance elections, this time to be held in October of this year and having the new government to take office on December the 31st of this year. This project was referred to the Constitution Committee and was not approved. So currently, the Congress is still discussing the issue, and the legislative could be concluding by tomorrow, but there is some discussion between the parties at Congress to extend this legislative session until February 17 to continue talking about this. But this is still working out right now as we're talking.
It is the Congress that will decide. It's all members of Congress. It's not one individual saying this or that.
No,
correct?
it's the attribution of Congress according to the Constitution, because to call in advance a general electoral process, we need to reform the Constitution. And the only body that can do that is Congress.
So the individuals that are elected at this point in time, if there's a new election, will they be allowed to put their names forward again for the next term, or would they have termed out?
This is something that is being discussed within Congress, no? If they have the possibility of being reelected or not, because the Constitution does not recognize the possibility for Congress, for congresswoman, congressman to be reelected.
Yeah.
So, but in this case, because the mandate is, is not finishing because it's for 5 years, I don't know if they are going to be discussing that possibility. Okay. This is something that pertains to the Congress.
In the removal of the president, Congress and the Constitution was followed in the process to have him removed. Is that fair to say?
Strictly, yeah. It was a constitutional succession. There's no question about it. Yeah.
Okay. So as far as the military, the judicial branch, there's an agreement that the process was legitimate process.
Yeah. Actually, when President Castillo attempted to do this coup d'etat and made this message to the nation, after the message, the armed forces and the police emitted a communique saying that they are going to respect the Constitution.
So it did what it was supposed to do.
And exactly. It respect the Constitution, and all the democratic institutions answered to that attempt of President Castillo, and he was impeached, as I mentioned earlier, and then Vice President Boluarte was sworn in.
So when you look now at the protests that are going, do you see any outside influence from countries in the region trying to have an impact on, to disrupt the activities in Peru, or do you see it just domestic?
There is ongoing investigations, and I cannot tell you whether is that the case or not. But the reality, as I mentioned, we have been able as a government to differentiate three types of protesters. No, the ones that are peacefully expressing their demands, what they believe it is necessary to do. Then the second group are the supporters of President Castillo, that the only political agenda they have is to have President Castillo liberated and to have a new constitution. And then these violent groups that I don't know. What I can tell you is I have here the information regarding a statement made by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, in which...
Mr. Ambassador, I'm
yes.
sorry, we're considerably over time. Can I ask that you conclude your remarks in about 20 seconds?
Oh, no, okay.
In response.
So I can go back on that. Yeah.
Thank you. So we next go to MP Zuberi.
Ambassador Rodriguez, I'd like to thank you for being here, and I've read your bio and see that you've been a diplomat for the last 20 years or so. Sorry, since 1990. So I recognize your service and your contribution to this committee. Can you please tell us what's the situation of the past president Castillo right now? What is his situation briefly? If you can just briefly touch upon that.
Yeah, of course. As I mentioned, President Castillo attempted a coup d'etat, so a criminal act typified in our criminal laws as a crime of rebellion was considered. So after giving a message to the nation where he declared the constitutional closing of Congress, the intervention of the whole judiciary, and he decided to rule by himself through decrees. So he was detained in flagrant crime by the Peruvian National Police and placed at the disposal of the corresponding judicial authorities. Given the seriousness of the act and the position Mr. Castillo held, the Peruvian Supreme Court of Justice ordered Mr. Castillo to be held in preventive detention for 18 months. This period of detention is being executed in strict respect of his fundamental rights. He's not in a common prison, he's in a special prison, and the former president has a legal defense, received daily visits. He has even been visited by the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. He is not isolated and actively coordinates the management of his Twitter account, among other rights. The situation of former President Castillo is a matter of a strict competence of the Public Prosecutor's Office and the judiciary, institutions that have been following his judicial case in a strict compliance with the rules of due process. And they work, I have to emphasize this, under the constitutional principle of separations of powers and are autonomous in their responsibilities and decisions in each specific case.
Thank you. That was a very thorough answer, and you basically highlighted what I was questioning about due process and his judicial rights. And I understand it's a very fluid moment in your country, but in hard times, what's critical is that the fundamental rights are respected. Continuing on that theme, I would like to. We know that 59 people have been killed after the new president Boullarte, your current president, has assumed office. Can you share how your country is protecting the fundamental freedoms of people to express their opinion and in a pacific way? And how is your country also ensuring that that people are not being injured or killed while expressing those fundamental freedoms?
Yes. The government is fully committed in promoting and protecting human rights. As I mentioned in my intervention, once we have these irreplaceable losses of life, the government reacted immediately, inviting the Inter-American Human Rights Commission to pay a visit, even the Office of the High Commissioner of the UN, and he was open to give all the materials, all the information that was requested by the prosecutor's office and the Attorney General's office to try to figure out what happened, no? And so to avoid the situation that happened in the past, the government has established dialogue and dissuasion as the first line of defense in all public demonstrations, avoiding the use of force at all times. And when legitimate use of force must be made, the government has ordered that all actions be accompanied by the presence of representatives of the Public Prosecutor's Office to safeguard the rights of all parties involved and open all necessary investigations. Well, I can give you an example. Last week, we had 70 points of blockades all over the country. Right now, in 1 week, we have now 58. So we have been able to diminish 21 with the participation of the police and the support of the armed forces. But doing this, we didn't have any injured people or deceased people because we are, the most important thing right now is the dialogue. So the police is convincing these people.
Is there an investigation happening with respect to the police action and how that loss of life actually took place, specifically around the police action and military action?
Yeah, as I mentioned in my intervention, the government of Peru is committed to provide all facilities to the public prosecutors' officers to conduct investigations leading to the identification of, if necessary, prosecution and punishment of those responsible for causing damages to life, physical integrity, and public and private property as a result of the protest and act of vandalism. Those cases of excessive, disproportionate, and illegitimate use of force are being investigated and will be sanctioned as appropriate. The judiciary will perform its functions with autonomy, taking into account the separation of powers and the rule of law. We truly seek justice as it should be done, and the government, as I mentioned, is providing all the information required by the Office of the Prosecutor Office and the Attorney General's Office.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. Mr. Bergeron, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, Your Excellency. Thank you for coming here today. The situation in Peru concerns us a great deal for a number of reasons. First of all, Canada and Peru are part of the Organization of American States, Quebec, whose common language is French, is part of Latin America, and Canada has offered $30 million in aid to Peru in 2021, assistance that was to improve transparency and efficiency, service delivery, and the promotion of a dynamic civil society and the protection of human rights, including indigenous populations, enabling them to advance and achieve gender equality, and it also touches on reproductive rights. Last January, the Commission of UN Human Rights condemned the way that the protest was dealt with at the university. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights also said that the Peruvian police used polyvalent shielded tanks and killing people, pregnant women, elderly, indigenous people, journalists who were subsequently released. So 59 people, unfortunately, lost their lives during these events. As we are concerned, and I thank you for coming here today to explain what's happening in your company, is there something that Peru is expecting from Canada to resolve the situation that is currently in Peru?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think today, more than ever, Peru needs the strong support of countries that promote democracy, the rule of law, and the promotion of protection of human rights, such as Canada, in order to protect democratic institutions and the rule of law in Peru. We are aware that the actions of December the 7th are the immediate cause of the political crisis we are experiencing, and that they have pushed the response capacity of our institutions to the limit, without ignoring the structural problems of inequality that exist in Peru. In this difficult context that my country is going through, the support for democracy and institutions that we have been receiving from Canada is highly appreciated and constitutes a tangible demonstration of the profound relationship of friendship, respect, and cooperation that exists between the two countries.
I'm sorry, I must insist, but in addition to this simple expression of intent, is there something specifically that you expect from Canada beyond this demonstration of interest as shown in this meeting with you and the representatives from Global Affairs?
Well, Canada is closely following what's going on in my country right now, and we do value the concern that they have as a country because of the situation we're facing right now. The transitional government, President Boluarte, right now is trying to set up dialogue tables with all the parties concerned regarding this crisis that we're facing. We are, for us, the main objective is to have this dialogue. If there is a protest, so we need to identify who are the leaders of these groups that are protesting and demanding that. The ministers have been traveling extensively all over the Peruvian territory, including the considered hotspot in Puno, Arequipa, Huancavelica, and So the disposition of the government for having a dialogue is very important. And obviously, for us, it's very important that the international community follow this closely. And this is a support that we, you say no, but this is just a statement, but those statements are very important. The words of the government of Canada for us are very important. It's not just an expression of support and made just for Canada, but there is another countries of the region that they are doing the same. So we do value the participation and the follow-up that Canada is making regarding the current situation that my country is doing. And I can tell you that I have been in permanent contact with my colleagues of Global Affairs Canada.
I know that I have little time left, but how do you explain the fact that the decision was made to preserve democratic institutions in your country, and yet we've had such a deterioration politically and socially over the course of just a few weeks?
Could you repeat, please?
How do you explain the situation that the process that was followed was aimed at strengthening democratic institutions? How can you explain the fact that this process, despite it happening, led to a political and social deterioration within a few weeks?
So we're working with total transparency. We have openness, transparency, accountability. We try to defend the full freedom of press and speech. Judicial institutions are operating with full autonomy. Citizens exercise the right to demonstrate. The government has the obligation to guarantee order and the rights of all Peruvians treated by violent groups trying to impose their own agenda. And the government is aware of the delicate socio-political situation and the complexities of reaching a solution to resolve a historical debt with regions and sectors of the population that have been marginalized for many years. For this reason, as I mentioned, the government has been deploying its best efforts to restore internal order, safeguarding the integrity of its population and its critical infrastructure in full respect of human rights and fundamental freedom. That's what right now the government is working on it.
Thank you. We now go to Ms. McPherson.
Thank you very much for being here, Your Excellency. It's of course a sad opportunity for you to be here. I have great memories of my time spent in Peru, and I know all of us here at this table are very saddened by what's happening in your country. I'm going to ask some questions that may echo a little bit of what some of my colleagues have asked, but just to give you an opportunity to share more information. In recent weeks, we know that you've met with Canadian civil society, including Amnesty International, and of course, they've raised some very serious allegations about the Peruvian authorities' violent repression of protesters. In recent weeks, attacks on protesters, who are often the most vulnerable and marginalized Peruvians, have continued in Peru. Peru, like all countries, does of course have an obligation under international law to respect the rights of citizens, and that of course includes the right to safe protest. And I do understand that you've identified that there are different groups of protesters. I'm just wondering, though, if you could speak a little more clearly about the plans to launch a thorough and impartial investigation into allegations of human rights violations during the protests.
I'm totally agree with you that this had to be an impartial investigation. This is something that we received as a message from the NGOs related to human rights. When I had the opportunity of meeting with the Secretary General of Amnesty International, she was very vocal in conveying that message, and I duly noted that, and I reported that to my capital. And so I think the most direct answer that I can tell you through the chair is that the tangible example of the government that once happens, all these terrible irreplaceable losses of life, the government reacted immediately. And when I say immediately, it was the day after. We invited the Inter-American Human Rights Commission, and not just this regional body, but also the High Commissioner for Human Rights of the UN. So that was a tangible example that how we do care on human rights. And besides that, there's an ongoing investigations developed by the Prosecutor's Office and the Attorney General's Office, which are autonomous agency, does not have any relationship with the judiciary, with the executive branch or the legislative branch, and they already had meetings with the former members of the cabinet, current members of the cabinet, high-ranking officers of the government. The government have provided a lot of material requested by the Attorney General's Office, and that's an impartial investigation. So in the international arena and in the national arena, we are answering and taking care regarding these requests made by the NGOs and many people know that it's necessary to have an impartial investigation.
Of course.
So we do believe in that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. How will your government address the ongoing marginalization, discrimination, and denial of rights in particularly rural and indigenous communities? I mean, that is an area that I think all people around the world are quite concerned with regards to these protests. If you could provide some information on that, please.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And we are developing every effort to undertake a process of national dialogue with an intercultural and human rights approach, in order to reach a consensual solution to the difficult situation the country is going through. The only peaceful, democratic, and constitutional solution, as has been saying, for the political crisis in Peru is to hold early elections. And as you are aware, Peru is recognized as a multicultural, multilingual country with more than 50 natives, ethnic groups, Andean, Amazonian, in addition to Afro-Peruvians and international migrants. In this sense, the intercultural approach involves sharing ideas and differences with the intention of developing a deeper understanding of these different perspectives and practice. So when the ministers are going to the regions, in the Andes, in the south, in the center, or in the Amazon region, they are doing this intercultural approach.
And that's when you are having these conversations with indigenous communities and indigenous leadership, do you feel that they see that as sufficient to ensuring that their rights are being protected? Do the communities themselves feel that is a sufficient response?
Well, that's the idea and the purpose of the approaches and the conversations. I cannot tell you right now how this dialogue is evolving, but the objective is to have an intercultural approach with the communities, the originary people, not just from the Andes, but also from the Amazon region as well.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. McPherson. We will now turn to Mr. Epp for the second round of questionings. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Epp.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ambassador, and your officials for coming to us today. In October, Peru hosted the Organization of American States annual meeting, and I had the opportunity to visit. I was in your Congress and met with 5 of your members, 5 of your congressmen. What is to be celebrated, from my perspective, and all of ours, I think, is that your Constitution held through a very difficult period. Here in Canada, we also have regional differences. We have Indigenous folks. We represent those interests through 5 different parties in our Parliament. My understanding is that in your Congress, and please correct me if I'm wrong, there are 16 parties, or there are 16, and clarify that, because far more than here in Canada. So if you could clarify that, my understanding too also that President Castillo was elected with about 16% of the popular vote. And this, for our background here, may help us understand and help appreciate how your Constitution held. Please, sir.
Thank you for the question. Yes, the Congress, within the Congress, you can count more than 8 political parties. So the voting is sparse, can we say that? Regarding the election of President Castillo, former President Castillo, in our Constitution, to get elected as a president in the first round, you have to have 50% plus 1 vote of the legally emitted vote, which is a special formula that we have in our country. In the first round, President Castillo roughly reached 17-18% of the total vote, and the second candidate 12 or something like that. So they went to the second round, and President Castillo won by 49,000 votes, roughly talking. So that's the process, no, that we have for electing our president.
There are ongoing protests, and you've elaborated how they have been peacefully dealt with in the interim since the transition. It's not unsurprising with that many divergent voices. Can you characterize the protests, particularly as it relates to the push for constitutional changes? Are they generally one voice, or are the protests presently being held? Is there one predominant message, or is there a wide variety of messages?
Well, let me go back. This is something that in some way addressed your question, if I may. Our Minister of Foreign Affairs has recently made statements to local media. She was clear in stating that the ongoing investigation of what happened in Peru will uncover the source of the funds of those who are financing the violent groups. Recently, the judiciary has detained 2 people who are allegedly linked to the financing. We are closely following the outcome of these investigations. Unfortunately, we have witnessed violent groups taking advantage of this demonstration, as I has been saying earlier, to commit serious attack against law enforcement, public and private property, and critical infrastructure. And this is very important to take into account. Since the protests began, the airports of Arequipa, Cusco, Juliaca, Andahuaylas, and Ayacucho, 5 airports, have been attacked 18 times, some of them simultaneously. Likewise, more than 40 offices of public institutions have been attacked, including 6 superior courts, 14 offices of the judiciary, 13 police stations, and several offices of the public prosecutor's office. In addition, there have been attacks on private property, such as the houses of congressmen in the provinces, as well as looting of company and business. So a total of 4,084 judicial files were burned during the acts of vandalism against judicial offices of the superior courts of Arequipa, Apurímac, Ayacucho, Huancavelica, and Puno. And according to the judicial power, beyond political motivations, the possibility of burning judicial files in order to obstruct judicial processes in areas highly affected by illegal activities such as drug trafficking, illegal mining, or smuggling is not discarded. So these acts of violence must be categorically rejected by all citizens who seek a democratic country. And again, I say that it is unacceptable that violence is a way to address social demands. No?
Thank you. We now go to MP Sarai. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Sarai.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Your Excellency, for joining us here today and shedding light on your situation in your country. Your Excellency, can you please share with this committee what the Peruvian Constitution defines as moral incapacity, and how was it used in the Peruvian vote on December 7th, 2022?
Thank you. There is no definition. Says can be vacated because of moral incapacity. It's explicitly says that way the Constitution.
So you're saying that the Constitution doesn't actually have a definition of it, but I guess the Congress felt that there is no capacity in the president to sustain, and therefore he was asked to be removed.
Well, former President Castillo attempted to do a coup d'etat. There was that situation fueled immediate reaction of all the democratic institutions, including the Congress. They convened immediately. They considered it was right to vacate President Castillo because of that attempt of making of coup d'etat, and they used that article. That's the answer that I can tell you, because that's something that is within the power of the Congress, no?
Okay, thank you. My next question is, can you kind of tell the steps that your government is taking towards reconciliation and working in partnership with indigenous peoples across Peru, especially during this current crisis and for the future?
Yes, thank you. Yes, as I have been saying, that the priority of the government right now is to establish dialogue with all the parties, and second, to attend the urgent social and economical demands. Those are the most important priorities for the government, because this current situation that we are facing for more than a month, economically talking, is affecting my country, and is affecting the most vulnerable people. Because when we talk about the blockades, I was mentioning that we had 78 blockades last week, and now we have 52. Well, these blockades affect the most vulnerable people because there is no possibility of doing trade. The Peruvian economy, unfortunately, is 75% informal, and mostly are encompassed by entrepreneurs, small micro enterprises that they live on a day-to-day basis. So to have these blockades affect them very, very, very hard. And besides that, those blockades affect the right of education and health, because the current vaccination program that we are implementing, because we have just received the bivalent vaccines, it is not possible to get the remote places where are the most vulnerable people to get the vaccination because the roads are closed. And for in terms of education right as well is affected, because the year of school begins in March. So the Ministry of Education needs to send the new materials to the public school. They need to do the checkup on all the infrastructure and to do the renovation. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that we are doing, as a government, our best to attend the urgent demands, because President Boluarte has been very clear saying that she considers his government as a transitional one, because the other political objective that in which there is a priority is to try to uphold an early electoral process as soon as possible. And but at the same time, as a state, we have to function and we have to attend the urgent demands that the people are demanding. And I'm giving you two examples, a clear one, no? Health and education.
Thank you. Your Excellency, as a like-minded ally...
I'm afraid, Mr. Sarai, you're out of time.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Chair.
So we now go to Ms. MP Sinclair de Gagné for 2 minutes.
Merci. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to say that my full name is Sinclair de Gagné, but it's all Salviarantenan. My mother calls me Natalie, but I do have another name, Cataloni. I wanted to thank you to allow me to speak. I had to cancel my Peruvian trip to Peru in 2 weeks, where I was going to visit my son. I'd also like to inform the committee about my concern. There are violent protests. There are assassinations amongst union members. There are about 8,000 people striking in the country throughout the various regions of Peru. are suffering as a result of this situation, and there's violence that's occurring in Equipa. It is the police and the military is trying to put an end to the road blockades because of the protests, and yet Peru is a very wealthy country with lots of mines and provides a lot to the rest of Latin America. So given this context, I'd like to underscore that Mr. Ambassador, I think that you gave a good, nuanced explanation of what's going on in Peru. Thank you. But one thing that struck me following this coup d'etat, which you described as being unconstitutional, removal of President Castillo occurred following a constitutional process. I'd like to put it on the table that Bolivia and Mexico actually supported President Castillo despite this.
You're out of time.
OK. J'avais combien de temps?
How much time did I have?
2 minutes for your question. So we will provide the opportunity for a brief response, Mr. Ambassador.
Mr. Chair, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Peru, Ana Cecilia Gervasi, stated at the 7th Summit of Head of States and Government of the CELAC, Community of Latin Americans and Caribbean States, that it is regrettable that some governments, particularly neighboring countries, have not accompanied Peru at this difficult institutional situation and rather have prioritized ideological affinity over unequivocal support for the rule of law and constitutional succession, seeking to establish a distorted narrative that does not correspond to the facts. It is surprising that by 2023, there is no unanimous rejection of an attempt to illegally close the Congress, the democratic institution, and to try to rule by himself, emitting decrees. The countries of the Americas have a deep vocation for peace and solidarity and are committed to strengthening democracy, and we ask the region to support Peru in channeling its destiny through free, open, and transparent elections. Peruvians will decide the country's destiny in democracy, dialogue, and peace. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. We now go to Ms. McPherson. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, thank you very much for all being here, gentlemen, and thank you for sharing this information with us. I do want to ask a little bit about, we have heard that there has been excessive force being used by the police and the military, that there has been tear gas fired indiscriminately, that there has been, people being fired upon in their upper body region. But one of the questions I want to ask a little more specifically about is we've also heard that local journalists have been targeted, that they've been assaulted, that they've been stripped of their equipment by police, that they are not being respected. And of course, for Canadians, for parliamentarians, as we try to find out the information about what is happening on the ground, a press that can do their job is fundamental. What can you tell us about that, please, Ambassador?
Well, what I can tell you is that if you see the Peruvian TV, you hear the Peruvian radios, not just in Lima but in the regions, you are going to be able to tell that there is a full freedom of speech and opinion. If you see what happened in the last days, there was a coverage, but the whole press. So what I'm telling you is that the government is not just a vocal in promoting and protecting human rights, but also in protecting the freedom of speech and opinion and liberty of press. No question about it. I can assure you that. So
is that you're now saying that's not true? That there have not been attacks on local media and journalists? Attacks. That there have not been attacks against journalists in Peru.
No, I don't know nothing about that.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. McPherson. We now go to Mr. Chong. You have 4 minutes, Mr. Chong.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellency, thank you for coming to our meeting today. It's good to see you again. I have two quick questions for you. My first is that concerns the election. One of the main demands of the protesters is for an immediate election, as you mentioned in your previous remarks. Currently, there's an election that was moved up to 2024. What's the likelihood of an election taking place this year or sometime this year, and even more to the point, much more quickly in the next several months?
That's I have to recognize that's a tough question to answer, Mr. Chair, through you. What I can tell you is that the Congress right now is discussing this matter, and they have the opportunity of tackling the issue and to resolve this, because what I'm telling you is that the government, in the political area, the main objective is to uphold an early general election, and all these political and social crises that my country is facing, one of the main demands by the population is to have as soon as possible an electoral process. So it's the Congress that right now are working on that. As I mentioned, there's more than 7-8 political parties involved, so the discussions in some way, I presume, complex. There should be a lot of timing and conversation to be exhausted all the coordinations and work that it is being done right now.
Ambassador, there's clearly many Peruvians are clearly upset with the state of their democracy. In a trusted poll done by Vanderbilt University, just 21% of Peruvians are satisfied that their democracy, and that's down from 52% a decade ago. A trusted poll shows that the majority of Peruvians support the protests. And so, clearly there are challenges with popular support in Peru for democratic institutions. There's been 6 presidents and 3 Congresses over the last 5 years. And Freedom House has highlighted a pattern of institutional clashes between the executive branch and the legislative branch. So my question is very simple. What can the government of Canada do to assist your government, your country, in providing, in helping stabilize your democratic institutions and helping to restore Peruvians' faith in their democracy? What can the government of Canada do in terms of support, aid, democratic assistance, those sorts of things?
Thank you for the questions. First, I would like to underscore something. What you say is true. We have five presidents in 6 years, and but the important thing here is that democracy works in my country, because these recurring crises were resolved through the constitutional order. So that's something that it is very important to take into account. And regarding what Canada can do to support us, I think one of our weakness is our capacity to manage resources at the regional and local level. So that's why there is a big frustration between the whole Peruvian population, because what they want is to receive and to be attending their own demands. And if we see how the regional governments or the local governments, and even the central government as well, when you see the public investment rate of how the investment is working, well, at the end of the year, instead the 100% of the resources that they receive, they just use 15-20%. So there is no capacity of management. So enhance the capacity for the regional governments, local governments will be more appreciated from countries that have a lot of experience in doing so. And also I believe the the channels of communications between political parties, between, let's say, political parties from Canada, like-minded political parties. They can exchange ideas and criteria. This is a way in giving support and establishing this positive exchange of ideas. I do believe in cooperation. In the political area, in the political area, there is a lot of possibility for doing a lot of cooperation. And in terms of political parties, you have Parlamericas, which is a very important institution in which there is a connectivity between all the parliaments of the region. That's a way in which Peru and Canada can work. And the other is this group of friendship between Peru and Canada, and they can have this close relationship and trying to work it out in some exchange of, I'm repeating, experiences in the political arena. No, I believe that those are two ways in which Canada could support us.
Thank you. We go to the final question for 4 minutes. Madame Bentayan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Y quería decir a nuestros amigos de Perú, muchas gracias por su visita hoy. I would also I'd like to hear you gentlemen on next steps, how you feel Peru will move forward given the current political context, and also how you feel Peru might work with international organizations in order to contribute to greater stability in the country.
Well, regarding the international organizations, and as I mentioned, taking into account the current crisis that we're facing, the Inter-American Human Rights Commission visited twice Peru. There's going to be a report, and there's going to be a recommendation that is going to be taken into account by the government. Also the same for the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. The OIS has been following the situation in my country as well, and Peru has been very open, transparent, and participating in that process. And obviously, on a bilateral arena, we have been in contact through our Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Deputy Minister, with many governments of the region and talking about the current situation. How my country is going to move forward regarding this, as I mentioned, no? First of all, this current government prioritize the dialogue and to try to attend the urgent needs in many areas: health, education, reactivation of the economy, and second, to try to have this new electoral process that is the only solution that the government is seeing as a way out for this crisis that we're facing right now.
Allow me, if you will, Mr. Ambassador, to pick up on one of the themes of my colleague, Mr. Tong's questions with respect to the resignation of multiple presidents in the last few years. From an outside perspective, and I appreciate that you have a much better understanding of this situation, it certainly appears as if the power of the executive has been diminished. Although the powers of the Parliament are quite extensive, I wonder how you you see politically you being able to work through this challenge with respect, particularly to the executive branch.
Well, there is a discussion within Congress to do a reform of the Constitution, and one of the areas, and they are thinking to do so, is the political one, and has to do with the situation that you exposed, no? Because there is this possibility to vacate the Congress, vacate the president, but at the same time, there's a possibility of the executive to close the Congress. Those are there are some articles of the Constitution that elaborate that. So there is an intention of the political parties to make a political reforms. It has been extensively said in interviews by different members of Congress, and they are working on that. But right now, because of the crisis that we're facing, obviously the main objective right now is try to figure out how are they going to decide. I mean, the Congress, whether it is possible to have an early electoral process or not, and this is the main discussion that they are having right now. No?
Mr. Chair, do I have a few moments?
No, you do not.
Thank you,
I'm
Mr.
afraid.
Chair. Muchas gracias y bienvenido.
Thank you. On that note, Your Excellency, allow me to thank you. We all certainly appreciate that your country is going through a challenging period, but we certainly hope that your government and the institutions in Peru will exercise restraint and remain committed to the highest constitutional ideals and the rule of law. Thank you.
Thank you.
And suspended for 4 minutes, 4 minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, February 2nd, 2023, the committee is now holding a briefing on the current situation in Peru. It is now my pleasure to welcome from the Department of Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development, Mr. Michael Grant, the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Americas. We also have with us Mr. Jason Toland, the Director General of South America. And finally, we have Ms. Marie-Christine Dubé, the Deputy Director of the Department. We're very, very grateful that you made yourselves available for opening remarks. As I'm sure you know full well, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I very much welcome this opportunity to discuss Peru, Canada's perspectives on the current situation. For a number of years, Peru has witnessed what can be best described as dynamic politics, even at times volatile. 6 presidents in 6 years is a clear example. Mais tout au long de ces défis,
But even at the same time, throughout these challenges, Peru has relied on solid institutions. Its constitutional processes have been respected. Peru's current political crisis was triggered on December 7th, 2022, when the president, Pedro Castillo, faced with removal proceedings, decided or tried to shut down Congress and govern by decree. In compliance with its constitution, the Peruvian Congress reacted by removing the president and transferring the executive power to the Vice President, Dina Boluarte, who became interim president.
Canada's position has been clear on 2 key points. First, as with the vast majority of the international community, we recognize that the constitutional process had been followed, and we deem the transfer of power to President Boluarte to be legitimate. While a small number of countries have a nuanced position to that, our key like-minded partners and the majority of countries in the hemisphere have also recognized the constitutional legitimacy of President Boluarte. Second, Canada has repeatedly emphasized the right to peaceful protest, the need to respect both the rule of law and human rights, and for security forces to exercise restraint. Le 17 décembre,
On December 17th, Minister Joly had a conversation with the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Peru, Ana Geresi, to express her sympathies with respect to the death of Peruvians. And Canadian representatives continue to convey this message to all parties as part of the through the regional and multilateral forums. Canada also encouraged efforts in order to have a transparent, rapid investigation into the alleged violations of human rights.
Fifth, Canada affirmed this message in our recommendations to Peru during their Universal Periodic Review at the UN Human Rights Council. And on January 30th, Canada played a key role to achieve regional consensus on an Organization of American States declaration expressing concerns about the use of force by authorities and calling for accountability for human rights violations, a declaration that was supported by all member states of the OAS, including Peru. Canada also supports and encourages continued collaboration between Peru and international human rights mechanisms, such as the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, to document and investigate alleged human rights abuses linked to the crisis. Le gouvernement péruvien tente présentement d'évancer la date de la prochaine élection présidentielle et d'établir un dialogue avec les manifestants. Sure.
The current government of Peru is trying to advance the date of the next presidential election and to have a dialogue with protesters. As part of its ongoing commitment with the Peruvian authorities and civil society, Canada is continue to underscore the importance of an inclusive dialogue regular enforcement of the law and respect for human rights.
His interest today underscores Canada's concerns, as well as the importance of a key hemispheric relationship. For many years, Canada and Peru have worked together closely in international fora in advancing the rule of law and support for democracy and human rights. Our relationship has prospered since our bilateral trade agreement entered into force in 2009. Canadian investments in Peru stand at over $12 billion, and our merchandise exports reached $1 billion, which is a new high. Our economic partnership has been complemented by investment in people through our comprehensive development assistance. Since 2012, Canada has provided over $330 million in programming, focusing on empowering women and girls, Indigenous communities, and more broadly, capacity building across civil society initiatives. Notre engagement bilatéral, y compris par
Our bilateral commitment through the Canada-Peru Parliamentary Friendship Group has always contributed to this relationship. In addition, Parlamerica's project with many countries in the region, including Paris, supports a range of issues, including transparency of Parliament.
Peruvian Canadian community here. We remain vigilant, connected to our partners in the hemisphere and to the government of Peru and to Peruvian civil society, and we will continue to work to be part of the solution. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Mr. Grant. We now go to the members. First up is MP Hoback. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for being here this afternoon. 4 minutes, I don't have a lot of time, so I'll be fast. First of all, our staff, people on the ground in Peru, any concerns for their safeties?
Our staff in Peru and in other places where there's crises is always our utmost importance. Okay,
yes or no?
Today, no, we haven't had too many concerns. There have been some days when staff had to remain in their residences rather than travel to the embassy, as the location around the embassy has seen protests. But we take the utmost caution when it comes to our staff.
Do you feel the request we're making to the Peruvian government to show restraint in how they handle protesters is being listened to and respected?
As I mentioned in my remarks, from the outset, our engagement with the government of Peru, we have been clear of the importance of police and other security authorities exercising restraint. We believe that the government of Peru has heard this, has listened, and we believe that they are moving in the right direction. The protests have been chaotic. They have taken place in many different locations. They've unfolded differently. In some instances, it would appear, based on some of the allegations, there may have been some police acting on their own recourse, perhaps not receiving command and control. But we will continue to emphasize that it's a responsibility of the government of Peru to ensure that excessive force is not used.
The upcoming election, will Canada be having observers and observer status in regards to that? And how do you see maintaining peace during the election period?
We have a good tradition in Peru and in the hemisphere of supporting elections. There's an organization in the OAS that coordinates hemispheric contributions, and we have provided funding in the past. My recollection, the last few elections in Peru haven't seen international observers. It could very well be the case this time, and I think Canada has a strong tradition of participating when that does happen.
You talk about institution building, and you talk about the areas that you've been working on, which I agree with. How do you feel in the whole region? We're starting to see the institutions being undermined by a lot of governments, not just in what's happened in Peru, but we're seeing it in other areas. Do you think Canada needs to spend more money in building up the actual institutions of government and maybe a little less around NGOs and civil society?
I would agree that we've seen in recent years strains on democratic governance in many places in the hemisphere. I think Canada's engagement, first and foremost, with citizens, with civil society, to ensure they understand their rights, that they have capacity to engage, that's primordial. In terms of direct assistance to governments, in terms of building their institutions, I think that is something that could be explored in terms of additional
Have we set aside
assistance.
funding for that in the last 6 years? Has there been a priority towards building institutions within the region
Yeah.
compared to other priorities?
The Global Affairs Canada does have a program of technical assistance, and some of that has been used in the hemisphere in terms of supporting.
Would be its budget.
I don't have that figure right in front of me.
Could you bring that just here
Absolutely.
down the road?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I'm just kind of curious. It seems like the institutions, when you look at the countries that are not on our side, those are also countries that have institutions that are starting to be undermined. Is that fair to say?
I don't know if I would characterize countries being on our side or not on our side. We have,
Difference of opinion.
yeah, we have.
Who don't share our opinion. How about I put it that way?
Well, I think from a Canadian perspective, we kind of lead with our values and our principles, and first among those, I would say, is a deep belief in democracy and democratic institutions. I think from the perspective of global affairs in the hemisphere, we are engaging with a range of actors, whether it is elected officials, whether it is public servants, civil society. And if there are opportunities for us to share Canadian experiences with all of those, we'll take advantage of it. Sometimes it comes through programming. Sometimes it comes through people-to-people exchanges, including with parliamentarians, we think is a very key aspect of that.
I assume I'm out of time.
Yes, you're out of time. So we now go to Mr. Sidhu. 4 minutes, Mr. Sidhu.
Chair, thank you, Madam Dubé, Mr. Grant, and Mr. Talon for joining us here today. I know Canadians are deeply concerned by the events and the situation currently unfolding in Peru, and so today's testimony is greatly appreciated. I wanted to know kind of more from you, Mr. Grant, or any of the witnesses here in terms of the situation on the ground. What are you hearing from the mission? Yesterday, this week, last week, kind of more recent events. Just if you can go into some more of the details there.
As you can imagine, we receive daily reports from the mission on the security situation, and as I said earlier, our first priority is really the safety and security of Canadians, those at the mission, and any Canadians that may be in the country. The situation has evolved quite a bit since December, and yes, there have been days when the protests have been quite robust, and other days when it's been quite quiet. So it's almost a daily basis that the mission, under the authority of the ambassador, needs to take a decision. Are they going in to the embassy that day? If protests are planned around the embassy, we will be very cautious and keep people at home. So I think in recent days, it's been relatively quieter, but there is a significant amount of vigilance to be ready in case there are protests that may disrupt their daily activity.
Thank you for that. And can you speak to the committee in terms of steps that Canada is taking to ensure or assist in a free and fair, transparent election whenever that happens?
As I mentioned earlier, Canada has a strong tradition of supporting elections and democratic processes. The Organization of American States has within it a unit that is specifically mandated to support not just elections themselves, but electoral institutions, and Canada is a key funder of that organization. We have had a history of supporting that agency financially, and when elections are called, I'm sure there will be a program and there will be a request for assistance. We'll look at it at that time. Also, as I mentioned earlier, I would not be surprised if in the next elections there is a request for international observers, and Canada has had a strong tradition of doing that in the region as well. So it's something that we would look at positively.
Well, thank you for that, and I know I only have about a minute left. Can anybody here kind of explain or what you foresee coming up in this, with the current situation?
It's very difficult to predict. I think you heard from the ambassador that there are efforts underway by the government, both to advance elections a bit further, as I believe they see it as a key way to address some of the concerns of the protesters, and they are trying to engage the protesters themselves. We applaud those efforts. We think it's important for dialogue. But in terms of the next steps, I think far be it from me to kind of predict which way it's going to go, either within the Constitution. We will continue to insist that all efforts need to be given for dialogue, both from the government and from those who are protesting. And at the same time, we'll continue to work with our partners in the region, including through the OAS, to call for that level of dialogue. There have been difference of opinions of different countries within the hemisphere, but I think the resolution that was passed on the 30th of January was a very important sign. It showed that there was unity, that this situation needed to be solved peacefully, calling on the government to investigate any violations of human rights abuses, and indeed calling for a peaceful way forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. We now go to Ms. Sinclair Dugagnier. You'll be happy to know you have 4 minutes this time. Good luck.
Merci.
Thank you. I will try and speak even faster. Give some work to the interpreters. My questions will be quite specific. First of all, setting aside the appeal that Madame Joly made to President Boularte, has other action been taken by the Government of Canada? Our ambassador, Amelia Cutt, talks regularly with Peruvian officials and even the Minister of Global Affairs. Myself and my colleagues have direct conversations with our counterparts. Thank you. With respect to our role in the OAS, do you think that the Government of Canada's role, Canada being a country with good institutions, do you think that we could have a positive impact on Peru? Yes, I believe so. The resolution that was adopted on January 30th is a good example of that. There was a process to come up with a common text. Canada played an important role along with other countries to come up with a proper agreement. Do you have any other examples where Canada has sent, let's say, a diplomatic mission to strengthen relationships between various groups, including the protests and unions, for example? In Peru? No, anywhere. I can't recall an example right now. But as far as we're concerned, it's important to have a dialogue, not only with the dialogue, but also with society. And our ambassador and his colleagues have been doing that, of course. And there's the example, the Quebec example, with the agreement between the various indigenous groups, such as the Entente des Braves, which furthers nation-to-nation relationships. That may be a way forward to help with a dialogue in Peru, knowing that there's a lot of interracial tension. Do you think that a diplomatic mission with people who would be capable of training people to have a good dialogue for this situation? I think that there are several examples where the Canadian experience could be useful for exchanges and provide examples. So this is possible, but without knowing all the details, I can't say much more. But exchanges on the Canadian experience, I think that's always a useful thing. All right. And a diplomatic mission that would be official, but setting aside the work that's done by the ambassador, this could be useful, particularly in the upcoming days. We believe that we're already connected with the government and with the ambassador and the minister, not only with Peru, but also with the neighboring countries in the hemisphere. So we are in the process of taking action diplomatically with respect to this crisis. Thank you.
Ms. McPherson, you have 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here today to share your expertise with us. One thing I just wanted to flag in some of the previous testimony we've heard today from you. Of course, governance is one of the pillars within the Feminist International Assistance Policy, and I just do want to say, from my perspective, civil society organizations are amongst the best at providing outcomes that provide for better governance. So I do want to just flag that I think that it is important that we continue to fund civil society groups that do this very, very important work, and it is, of course, one of the key 6 pillars of our Feminist International Assistance Policy. You know, I've been speaking to folks from Amnesty International, from the Americas Policy Group, and many different civil society organizations, and they, of course, are raising serious concerns about the violence that is happening in Peru. I know that they've written to the department and that they have not heard back from the department, which I would like to flag appears to be a concern often that civil society groups are not responded to. So I would just like to make that flag for you. Their partners in Peru have described serious and violent repression by Peruvian authorities, including indiscriminate attacks on protesters, journalists, and human rights defenders. Of course, I'm deeply concerned. I think we all are deeply concerned about how that is impacting vulnerable Peruvians, like minors, like Indigenous people, like rural communities. And we do know that in the past few years, Canada has issued no less than 6 export permits for arms to Peru, including automatic weapons, chemical or biological toxic agents and riot control, armored or protective equipment. So given the clearly violent repression of protesters by Peruvian authorities, will the minister refuse to sign any further permits for Peru and cancel any existing permits? And can you tell me how many of these permits are ongoing?
Thank you very much. What I can say is, Canada and Peru over the last years and decades have had a robust relationship, including, defense to defense relations. In terms of the specific export permits that you reference, I don't have that information with me right here. I can say, and just to note, I'm not the official responsible for export permits, although, of course, my branch would be consulted on any export permits. We don't know of any processes currently underway where we're being asked for our views on export permits. And I can simply say that I do know that anytime there is an export permit, the current situation on the ground and relations with countries will be taken on board. But in terms of the specifics, I don't have that at my fingertips.
You could ask your colleagues within Global Affairs Canada to provide some information on how we are adhering to the Arms Trade Treaty and whether or not those are being evaluated considering the deteriorating human rights conditions in Peru right now. You did speak about the conversation that Minister Joly had on January 17th, and in the letter that the Americas Policy Group has written, they've asked Canada to urge Peruvian authorities to, and I quote, deploy all available resources to resolve the conflict through dialogue, without discrimination and listening to all voices. How is Canada responding to this call?
Since the onset of the crisis that Peru is currently facing, and certainly when there have been events where violence has occurred, we've made it absolutely clear to Peru that they have a responsibility to ensure that their security forces are not using excessive force, and that any allegations that have been made need to be investigated. We were pleased that the government of Peru has welcomed the involvement of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, as well as the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. We believe that that work of those 2 organizations needs to proceed, and any allegations that have been made needs to see a result and need to see a conclusion. We have repeatedly said this to Peruvian authorities, not only during Minister Joly's call with her counterpart, but also through our ambassador to Minister, to the President, and repeatedly to other senior officials.
And I would just urge you to also provide that information and that support to the civil society communities in Canada that are raising these concerns with you.
Thank you. We now move to the second round. First up is Mr. Genis. Mr. Genis, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Just briefly, I want to read a notice of motion that the committee undertake a study of the conduct of McKinsey & Company internationally and of the implications of the Government of Canada's contracts with McKinsey for our foreign policy. And I want to signal to the committee that given the extent to which the House has been seized with this issue, I do intend to move this motion as soon as possible, and I'll turn the balance of my time over to Mr. Rapp.
We've heard many calls for support for Peruvian institutions of democracy. This happens to be International Development Week. We've met with numerous organizations there, and their concerns to us is that Canada, while many multilateral organizations do good work, sometimes our Canadian institutions are not given the proper amount of attention. Similarly, right here in Ottawa, based in Ottawa, we've got the Parliamentary Democracy Organization, which seems to be an excellent vehicle to respond to the calls that we're hearing, both from the testimony today and from the Peruvian. Can you talk about the level of funding that, as I understand, there's danger of it being closed? Can you talk about the level of funding? Could other funding be redirected from multilateral organizations to fund our very own?
Mr. Chair, can I just get a clarification? You're speaking of funding to?
Support for the Parliamentary Democracy Organization based here, right in Ottawa.
I see.
Parliamentary Center, sorry. Yeah,
thank you very much. Mr. Chair, the funding of that organization that Global Affairs would manage is not part of my portfolio. But what I would say is, in terms of support to Peruvian institutions, it is something that has been included in our assistance over the years. And I mentioned earlier, there's a regional project that Parlaméricas has undertaken that includes Peru, which we think is vitally important. When it comes to our development program in Peru, it is something that we constantly look at in terms of planning for future years. Has the situation on the ground changed? Do we need to adjust our funding? And I think that's something that we're doing right now to see, do we need perhaps to move more funding into that institutional capacity building space? But our commitment to Peru has been very, very strong and will continue to be, including facilitating the exchange of civil society from Canada with civil society from Peru and parliamentarians.
I want to get one more quick question in. Peru was very late to condemn Russia's aggression into Ukraine, partly because of their reliance on Russian support for their armed forces. There was recent reports of a landslide where Peru does not have the capability, other than through Russian equipment, to reach some of the remote areas. Can you comment? Is that some place that Canada could support?
I'll turn to my colleague, Mr. Tallon, on that one.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We don't have any specific information about that, any requests related to that. Usually we respond directly to formal requests that are made to us for assistance, and we'd be happy to consider this in the context of any additional information that we can receive on the issue. But we understand that first of all, the nature of the challenge that would be presented and the particular issue raised with the use of equipment from Russia in that context. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Zuberi. Mr. Zuberi, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you for being here, Mr. Grant, and to your colleagues for taking the time. I'd like to ask you, I know you already touched upon this, but can you speak with some specificity about how, in your view, that the government and security forces conducted themselves in the difficult moments at that point in time when 59 people were killed? How did the government and security forces conduct themselves at that point in time?
I mean, the loss of life has been tragic in this crisis, and it's something that we have spoken directly to the government of Peru about. I think it's clear that there are investigations needed to identify exactly what transpired. There have been many media reports on, that it was the security forces who were using excessive force, and of course claims by Peruvians themselves. This needs to be investigated. We're very happy that the government of Peru has agreed. They've launched their own investigations. And as important for us, they have welcomed the role of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights and the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. In terms of the specifics, it's very difficult, not having been in those particular settings to rule one way or the other at this point in time. But it's absolutely critical that those investigations take place and that there is a conclusion to them.
I would assume that you would be looking for a thorough and robust investigation to what happened. Thorough,
Absolutely.
Robust, transparent.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
In terms of how the government and security forces are currently conducting themselves, hindsight's always 20/20, but how they are currently conducting themselves, do you feel that the standard is within norms in the region and where we would want to see them to be going to?
I think the commitment by the government, including President Boularte, is very important. The commitment to ensure that all the security forces are not using excessive force. At the same time, protesters have a right to peacefully protest. That has been another key message from Canada. At the same time, the security forces do have an obligation to protect Peruvians. And if violence is used by protesters, they do have an obligation to address it. But if violence is used or excessive force has been used, it should be investigated. There's a commitment that's been made by the government, and we will continue to hold them account to that.
Are you monitoring the situation?
Our team on the ground is doing its best to report on events. As I mentioned earlier, one of our top priorities is the safety and security of Canadians, both our staff and anyone who's visiting. We would not put our staff in harm's way, but they do their best to report based on what they are hearing, what they are seeing on media, and of course, hearing directly from Peruvians.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now go to Mr. Bergeron. You have a minute and a half, sir.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. I'm going to ask you the same question as I put to the ambassador. How do you explain the fact that a process designed to protect democratic institutions has led to political and social deterioration? That's a good question. It's clear that the policies in Peru are evolving. I think there are 12 parties in the Peruvian Congress, 16 in total. There are about a little over 100 seats in Parliament. So it's difficult to arrive at a consensus, and it's difficult to reach an agreement between the president and the executive power and the Parliament. In previous years, we have seen some occasions, including another occasion where a president was removed. So it comes as no surprise exactly to see that the president wanted to shut down the Congress, and so the Congress decided to remove the president. The rules were followed, but this didn't come as a surprise. The surprise to us was the protests and the reaction of the government, or the response of the government. Our position was very clear on that. There is a right to protest peacefully, and also the government must respect the protesters and not use excessive force. Why did the situation deteriorate?
For the last question, we go to Ms. McPherson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
A minute and a half, please.
So the violence against Indigenous people, against protesters, is not something that's new. And unfortunately, Canadian mining companies are often implicated in Peru in the violence against Indigenous people. But yet, following Castillo's departure and the outbreak of the protests, His Excellency Ambassador Marcotte visited with Peru's mining minister first and did not give the same level of interaction or support to civil society, to protesters. Can you explain that decision?
Well, first and foremost, Ambassador Marcotte and his team are in constant contact with all aspects of Peruvian society, whether they be civil society organizations or the government.
Chose to meet with the mining minister as one of the very first meetings.
No, I believe when the crisis unfolded, our engagement with the government of Peru was very specific to what we felt were their obligations to ensure there wasn't a use of excessive force. I'm not sure the exact date of when you're mentioning in terms of the meeting with the mining minister. When it comes to Canadian companies operating in Peru or operating anywhere, there's an understanding from the Government of Canada to them that to receive the services of Trade Commissioner Service in our department, that they must uphold their obligations.
With all due respect, I would say the Corps and the National Contact Point are relatively useless at doing the role that is needed to be done. I've called them out for their inaction quite frequently, and of course most of the companies that are bad actors don't receive the support from the Canadian government. So not really a very good stick in that circumstance. But thank you.
Thank you very much. And on that note, allow me to thank Mr. Grant, Madame Dubé, Mr. Toland. We're very grateful for your time and your expertise. Now, if members could remain for a few minutes, there's a few things you have to approve, a few housekeeping items. The first one, of course, is a number of budgets. There is the budget for the briefing on Peru, and I understand everyone has received a copy of this. So unanimously approved by all the members. Excellent. There's a new budget proposal in relation to the current trip of the committee. I take it everyone has seen that as well, and it's adopted. Excellent. Thank you. Now, with respect to the news release in relation to the scheduled presentation of the report entitled The 2022 Extreme Flooding in Pakistan, Saving Lives and Supporting a Climate Resilient Recovery, is it the will of the committee to adopt and publish the news release? It's something we didn't previously touch on. Thank you. News release in relation to the scheduled presentation of the report entitled The Russian State's Illegal War of Aggression Against Ukraine. Is it the will of the committee to adopt and publish this news release? Yes. Lastly, is it the will of the committee to adopt the following motion, that the clerk of the committee make the necessary hospitality arrangements to purchase appropriate gifts in relation to the reception invitation scheduled on Monday, February 13th, 2023, and Wednesday, February 15th, 2023, with the Ambassador of Sweden to Canada, His Excellency Mr. Urban Allen, the Ambassador of Finland to Canada, and Mr. Roy Erickson, and the Ambassador of Poland to Canada, His Excellency Witold Zielski.
What is the cost?
Carte blanche.
Did I just hear the Conservatives say, oh, come on? You want $20 for broken cracker?
Okay, it's a maximum of $50, but probably hovering closer to $20.
The MP who has spent highest amount on the promotional gifts. I suggest keep it to less than $28.25.
Allow me to remind all the members that we are in public. We are in public. So that's that. And then lastly, as you know, the subcommittee did meet, but we have yet to agree on a schedule. So would all the members unanimously agree that we do a study on the situation in Turkey and Syria with respect to the latest earthquake? Yes? Everyone is in agreement? Excellent. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, can I just can I just point out that I think it is important that we have if we could get witness suggestions to you by today, would that be helpful? I do think it is important that we have civil society be at the table for these, and we didn't in today's conversations, and I do think it is important that those voices are heard.
Absolutely, but if I would just remind members for today's purposes, for sure, that would provide the clerk sufficient time to reach out to them. But I should say with respect to today, no one did raise it previously. And by the time it was raised, it was essentially late in the day yesterday, so we cannot permit that. Yes, Mr. Jones.
Yeah, is noon tomorrow enough time to get witnesses in to schedule? No, end of day today.
End of day today, please.
Okay. All right. We'll do our best.
Okay.
Thank you.
So end of day today, anyone, if you have any suggestions as to NGOs that can speak to the issue of Turkey and Syria and the devastating earthquakes, please do submit them by 5 o'clock today. Yep. Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Adjourned.